Kristen Amanda Brink tugged the straps of her red hiking backpack as her boots crunched over the sun-dappled dirt path of Devil's Den State Park. Her husband Clinton, walking just ahead with their daughters in between, laughing over some shared joke about squirrels hoarding acorns, and for a moment, everything was picture perfect. Perfect Arkansas's air, warm with mid-July breeze. Forest scents thick with pine and earth, birdsong trickling down through the canopy like a soundtrack to a family. Memory in the making. The kind of day people post online with the caption, "Unplugging to reconnect," but less than 2 hours later, that same trail would be soaked in blood. Sirens would echo through the gorge, and 2 little girls would be crying for their parents. Victims of a horror no one expected in such peaceful wilderness. It began with subtle tension, a disturbance just beneath the ordinary. With Clinton pausing to scan a rustle in the brush, his tone still light but eyes narrowed slightly, as if his gut was catching on to something his brain hadn't processed. Yet the girls giggling as they skipped ahead, Kristen following close behind. Her long ponytail swinging, her gray hiking shirt clinging slightly from the heat. Her bright red backpack contrasting vividly against the green nothing unusual. Nothing alarming, just a family walking together into the woods. But someone else was walking with them, not beside them, not far behind. But close enough to watch, close enough to hear the names they called out to one another, close enough to study their routine, their comfort, their trust in the trail beneath. Their feet, and he was dressed for the shadows. Dark gray hoodie, loose-fitting pants, black fingerless gloves, sunglasses that made him faceless even in daylight, and a long black duffel bag that never left his side, swinging just slightly as he moved through the underbrush like he'd done this before. Like he knew how to step between dry leaves and broken twigs without making a sound. They passed Fossil Flats Trail and reached a bend where the woods grew denser, the light thinner, and that's when Clinton slowed again, noticed the silence. Noticed the way even the birds had stopped singing in, then Kristen saw it too. A figure behind a fallen log, motionless, crouched, but unmistakably human. Half hidden, but clearly watching, and that's when the air shifted, the warmth gone, replaced by an instinctual cold. The kind that comes when prey realizes it's being hunted. Kristen's voice cracked slightly as she called to the girls, telling them with forced calm to come back, and they obeyed without question. Her tone more urgent than usual, and Clinton stepped forward protectively, scanning the tree line, whispering back to her, "Did you see that too?" But there was no time to answer because the figure was gone.
Ouch.
Moved without sound into the trees, and every nerve in Clinton's body fired at once, he told Kristen they were turning around. No debate, and the family began backtracking with quickened steps, the children asking questions, confused but trusting. Kristen keeping her voice calm while her heart pounded, gripping both girls' hands tightly, and behind them, footsteps soft at first, deliberate, measured, just enough. To be heard just enough to say, "I'm still here." Clinton turned once, then again, and the man was there, 20 feet back, walking now, and no attempt to hide, just walking. And that was somehow worse than if he'd lunged. This was controlled, practiced, meant to terrify, and it worked. The trail ahead seemed longer than before, like it was stretching away from them. And with no cell signal and no one else around, they were utterly alone. "Start running," Kristen whispered. "Girls, go run ahead. Find people. Don't stop." And the girls, bless them, obeyed again, sprinting with small feet and big eyes in tearful fear, while their parents stayed behind to face whatever. This was Clinton turned to confront the man, stepped in front of Kristen, demanded to know what he wanted. But the man said nothing, just kept walking, and then stopped, reached slowly into his duffel, pulled out something metallic, glinting, even in the dim forest light, and then charged. Clinton met him head, tried to wrestle the blade away, shouting for Kristen to run, but she stayed, grabbed a broken branch, struck the man in the shoulder with all her strength. And the sound of violence echoed across the forest like an explosion. Grunts, gasps, flesh and fabric. Tearing Clinton took a stab to the side, collapsed but still fighting, Kristen going for his face, gouging with her fingers, kicking, screaming, and finally the man relented, ran, bleeding from the eye, stumbling into the woods, and vanishing as quickly as he'd come. Kristen dropped beside her husband, pressed her hands to his wound, whispered, "Stay with me. Please stay with me." And Clinton, dying but conscious, only asked if the girls were okay. And when she nodded, he smiled, just barely, and closed. His eyes for the last time. Kristen was fading too, stabbed in the back, losing blood fast, her red backpack now soaked and torn. But when the Rangers finally found her, she was still breathing, still fighting, and her first words were, "Are my girls safe?" And when they told her yes, she smiled faintly and let go. Meanwhile, the two girls had run nearly a mile before stumbling into a couple's campsite. Sobbing, incoherent, but able to say, "Mom and Dad." Trail. Man with knife, and that was all it took. The manhunt began within the hour, with park rangers sealing all entrances, helicopters launched, drones scanning the ridgelines, and dogs tracking the scent the killer had left behind, faint and erratic, but real. The forest was vast, over 2,500 acres of trails, creeks, and canyons, and he could have gone anywhere. But investigators believed he had a plan. Maybe he'd camped out for days, stalking families, waiting, choosing the right moment, and vanishing. Before technology could catch up, news broke within hours. Double murder in Devil's Den. Headlines screamed, and social media lit up with theories. Photos, amateur drone footage, even a few blurry captures of a man in dark clothing with a duffel bag, but nothing solid. FBI joined local authorities the next morning, combing through park cameras, witness accounts, and license plate reader logs. But the killer seemed to have taped over his plates, worn gloves, and known where to avoid detection. It was clear. This wasn't random. It was ritualistic, maybe even premeditated over weeks. And in the days that followed, the story exploded. True crime forums dissected every detail. YouTube sleuths traced similar attacks in nearby states. A teacher from Oklahoma even reported seeing a man matching the description watching her school's hiking club months earlier. The Brinks daughters were placed in temporary care with relatives, safe but traumatized, giving limited but chilling statements to authorities, describing the man's quiet face, the moment their mother screamed. Their father lunged, the sounds they'd never forget. And so, the first part of the Devil's Den tragedy ended not with answers, but with silence. Two loving parents gone, two children scarred forever, a forest scarred by violence, a killer still out there, blending into crowds, changing his look, waiting perhaps for the next trail, the next family, the next moment to emerge from the trees. For the next 72 hours after Kristen and Clinton Brink were found brutally attacked on the Fossil Flats Trail, Devil's Den State Park transformed from a family hiking haven into the epicenter of one of the most intense and mystifying manhunts in Arkansas history, with law enforcement from 5 agencies pouring into the dense woods where cell signals vanished and footsteps echoed endlessly through hollow ridges. Search dogs caught traces of the suspect's scent, but lost it near the riverbed, suggesting he may have crossed barefoot or even doubled back using a rarely marked deer path, a move that would indicate premeditation and deep knowledge of the terrain. And as rangers and federal agents swept through campsite after campsite, they realized something chilling. There had been other sightings. Whispers. Fragments that didn't seem to matter until now. A family 2 days prior had reported a man in a hoodie standing silently across from their tent at 3 a.m., gone before they could fully wake up. A solo hiker had felt watched for miles and noticed a figure mirroring his pace deep in the woods, only to disappear whenever confronted. And then there were the photos. Hundreds of tourists had uploaded their vacation images to social media, and digital investigators began combing through them, looking for the same dark hoodie, the black duffel bag, the sunglasses, and slowly, shockingly, he began to appear blurry, small in the background, sometimes just a silhouette. Other times clearer, like in a photo of a birthday picnic near Yellow Rock Trail where the man stood halfway in the tree line, not part of the group. Unnoticed at the time, but now undeniable. The timeline widened. He'd been stalking this park for at least a week, maybe longer, hiding in plain sight, and forensics confirmed he had camped near the East Ridge, where they found burnt food wrappers, duct tape, gloves, and a serrated hunting knife wrapped in a stained t-shirt. All buried beneath pine needles, behind a cluster of stones, a crude stash site, rushed but telling. Meanwhile, Kristen and Clinton's daughters remained under police protection with extended family, shielded from press and social media. But what little they shared was haunting. "He had no expression," said the eldest, barely old enough to understand death, but old enough to describe the killer's face, or lack of one, as if his sunglasses and hoodie erased humanity. And more disturbingly, they both agreed on one phrase: he didn't speak, not even when he hurt them. This silence became a pattern, a calculated, cold approach used to minimize noise, delay panic, and assert control, which behavioral analysts from the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program flagged as unusual and dangerous. Back in the forest, rangers continued finding subtle signs: a pair of fresh boot prints circling a ranger tower, a half-eaten protein bar still warm, and even a voice message left on a walkie that had been snatched from a trailhead. Post and later turned back on. Just static, followed by breathing, then the unmistakable zip of a duffel bag being closed. The man was playing with them now, leading them deeper, challenging the search while never being caught, and national media pounced, naming him the Devil's Den Phantom, plastering composite sketches across every major network, but none of it yielded results. No name, no ID, no one matching the physical description on any local or federal database. Investigators floated several theories. He was a former ranger, or military-trained survivalist gone rogue, or worse, a serial predator using remote trails to test methods before escalating to more urban areas, and this last theory gained traction when a woman in Oklahoma emailed a tip saying she'd seen a man in a dark hoodie watching her from across a campsite near Broken Bow Lake 3 weeks earlier. He was holding something, possibly binoculars, and stood perfectly still for nearly 15 minutes before vanishing. This report led authorities to expand the search radius beyond Devil's Den, believing he may have hitched a ride, stolen a vehicle, or followed another trail system to disappear into the Ozarks entirely. But then, 5 days after the murder, a breakthrough came from a surprising source: a local wildlife photographer who had left a motion triggered camera deep in the forest near a deer migration route. He hadn't checked the card in a month, but when he reviewed the images, one stood out: a man walking alone, mid-step, face hidden, carrying a large duffel bag, time-stamped just hours after the attack. Most striking was the item hanging from his belt, a small red keychain light, nearly identical to the one Kristen Brink had kept on her backpack for emergencies. Suddenly, there was proof he had taken something from her, a trophy, or worse, a token of satisfaction. And this altered the case classification, no longer a random killing. This was personal, pathological, possibly ritualistic, and it fueled a shift in strategy now. They weren't just searching for a suspect, they were chasing a pattern. And patterns began to emerge slowly and quietly. 3 deaths in Missouri state parks in the last year had all occurred on quiet weekdays, all with no signs of robbery, all with victims found near trailheads, and though local police had ruled them as accidental or animal-related, the FBI reopened those files and noticed eerie similarities: missing camping knives, oddly placed stones at the scene, and all victims being families or couples on their first visit. Meanwhile, the search at Devil's Den continued with smaller, tighter units, some in plain clothes, others in ghillie suits, crawling through ferns and creek beds, hoping for one mistake: a fire lit too soon, a footprint too deep, a reflection from those sunglasses. But nothing came easy, and despite round-the-clock patrols, thermal drones, and helicopters fitted with FLIR, the woods remained silent, hiding their secret, and the killer remained a shadow. The Brinks daughters were now drawing pictures in therapy, some of which featured a dark man watching from trees, sometimes holding a blade, other times just standing with no face, and the youngest one had drawn a picture of her mother's red backpack hanging from a tree, because that's what he took, she said, though no one had ever told her the backpack was missing. It was an image that broke the hearts of even the most seasoned agents, many of whom now carried Kristen and Clinton's photo in their case folders as a reminder of why they were still searching, still hoping, still pushing through the heat and silence of Devil's Den. And in all of this, one horrifying truth became clear. The man in the trees didn't just choose a random trail, he chose a family, studied them, waited for the perfect moment to strike, and he might be doing it again, somewhere nearby. Watching another group laugh, hike, take photos completely unaware that he is already part of the background in one of their pictures. The days that followed were cloaked in a surreal silence. Not the natural hush of the woods, but an unnatural quiet that descended like fog over the community. Though the land itself was mourning the loss of Kristen and Clinton Brink while whispering warnings to those still searching for the faceless man who had slipped between trees like smoke. Investigators were now running on 4 hours of sleep a night, driven by a mix of adrenaline and dread. Each passing hour, without a break in the case, thickening the air with a sense of failure. And while the FBI's behavioral team worked tirelessly from a mobile command center near the ranger station, their profiles of the suspect grew darker and more chilling. A white male, likely between 30 and 45, physically fit, high-functioning. Possibly ex-military or law enforcement due to his stealth and precision, someone capable of surviving for days in unforgiving terrain without supplies, and who seemed to not only anticipate search patterns, but to enjoy watching the chaos he'd unleashed. Much like a predator circling wounded prey. And yet, even with aerial surveillance, bloodhounds, and thermal cameras blanketing Devil's Den, he remained invisible. His last trace being that single trail cam image and a footprint near Lee Creek, a size 11 boot print with a unique, diagonal crack in the sola print that reappeared miles away 2 days later beside a campsite fire that had burned clean through the night without alerting any patrol. It was as if he were playing a game, a slow and deliberate one, moving when they paused, hiding when they pushed forward. His presence like a whisper that refused to rise into a scream, and while agents studied maps and old ranger logs, looking for forgotten hunting paths or abandoned firewatch towers he could be using as vantage points, other specialists combed through crime databases nationwide, hoping to match his methods with unsolved murders in national parks and remote campsites, eventually compiling a list of 12 cases across 7 states that bore unsettling resemblance. To the Brinks tragedy, each involved outdoor attacks, precision strikes, a lack of DNA, and victims that seemed random until viewed together, revealing a profile of someone with patterns hidden in silence. Meanwhile, attention shifted to the Brinks rental SUV, which had been found with its doors shut and locked neatly, untouched except for one strange detail. The passenger seatbelt was stretched fully out and clipped in, as if someone had buckled. And an invisible rider, detail too strange to ignore, and one that Kristen's sister confirmed neither she nor Clinton would have done. And it fed into a growing theory that the killer had been inside the vehicle at some point, maybe even before the family arrived at the trailhead. That same day, a volunteer drone pilot reviewing old footage spotted something a Dan anomaly in thermal scans taken the night after the murders. A heat signature tucked beneath a rock shelf half a mile from where Clinton's body had been found, small, unmoving, and previously dismissed as animal activity. But when agents returned to the location, they found evidence of human presence: a flattened bed of moss, a plastic wrapper, and a single black fiber consistent with the hoodie material found earlier. It was his hideout, a silent perch with a direct line of sight to the search teams below. And what disturbed the agents most wasn't the view, it was the fact that the phantom had stayed so close. Watching them, studying them, while they combed the area just yards away, the case shifted again, this time from hunt to counter-surveillance. With officers now realizing they weren't tracking a suspect, they were being tracked, baited, and possibly tested for weaknesses. That night, the manhunt was paused for the first time, a tactical recalibration designed to draw the phantom into a false sense of safety. And cameras were hidden across key choke points while bait campsites were staged with fake families and parked vehicles. The operation was called Echo Ness, and for the next 48 hours, Devil's Den was transformed into a trap one that failed spectacularly when on the third night, a ranger went missing during a solo perimeter check, his radio last pinging near the northern ridge. At sunrise, they found his body a single puncture wound to the chest. No signs of struggle, no footprints, and his eyes still open in shock, his rifle untouched on the ground. The phantom had struck again, and worse, he had done it while surrounded by dozens of armed officers, confirming what many feared. He was better trained, more patient, and no longer targeting random hikers, he was targeting law enforcement. That morning, panic reached the public, and social media exploded with conspiracy theories, survivor stories, and unconfirmed sightings. Some helpful, others chaos-inducing, and the FBI created a public tip line flooded with over 22,000 messages in the first week, one of which finally broke the case opener call from a retired Arkansas Game and Fish officer who said the man in the composite sketch resembled a former seasonal ranger named Nathaniel Crowder, who had worked in various parks under rotating IDs and who had gone off-grid after a disciplinary review in 2017 related to stalking campers and setting illegal wildlife snares. His personnel file had been redacted due to internal complaints, but when unsealed under emergency provision, it revealed something horrifying. Crowder had been dishonorably discharged from the National Guard for psychiatric issues following a deployment overseas and had a sealed arrest related to domestic violence in Texas. Worse still, his last known mailing address was less than 60 miles from Devil's Den. And a photo from a 2016 park staff gathering showed him in a dark hoodie, black pants, and sunglasses, with a red LED keychain dangling from his belt. Ted matched to the trail cam image. A warrant was issued, and forensic analysts linked him to other crime scenes by matching unique plant spores found on the brinks, clothing to rare moss strains only found in the region where Crowder had once been stationed. Now identified, the Phantom was no longer a myth. He had a name, a past, a motive, and most terrifying of all, a vendetta. The next phase was clear. Crowder wasn't hiding anymore. He was hunting, retaliating, and escalating, and authorities feared what would happen if he slipped past the perimeter again. Search was no longer just about justice, it was about stopping a man who had learned how to disappear inside the wild and who had made the Devil's Den not just a murder scene, but his home. The identification of Nathaniel Crowder changed everything. What had once been a faceless specter haunting the Devil's Den trails now had a name, a history, and a disturbingly well-documented descent into calculated violence. And his agents combed through his background. They uncovered a trail of suppressed complaints, ignored red flags, and bureaucratic failures that allowed a man like him to drift between systems unnoticed. Crowder had once served with distinction in the National Guard, praised for his navigation skills and composure under pressure, but after a deployment in 2011, fellow soldiers noticed changes in his demeanor. He became withdrawn, hypervigilant, obsessed with silence and control, and in one chilling incident recounted in sealed testimony, he allegedly disappeared during a training exercise in North Carolina for 48 hours, only to reappear with a fully completed map of enemy positions drawn from pure observation, a level of stealth and focus that stunned his unit but unnerved his commanding officer. Wrote that Crowder seemed less interested in team strategy and more fascinated with outwitting people as prey. When he returned home, he took seasonal jobs with park services across several states, blending into staff rotations while maintaining no fixed address, using burner phones, fabricating stories about personal loss to avoid deep scrutiny. And it was during this period that the pattern began: quiet disappearances near campsites, single hikers never returning, animal maulings that didn't match any known predator. Though none were ever tied to him directly, internal ranger complaints described finding unauthorized survival shelters in restricted zones. And several recalled seeing a man matching Crowder's build moving through the trees late at night, always just beyond the reach of a flashlight. Now, as law enforcement converged around his last known cabin near Buffalo National River, they discovered his quiet room, a small underground bunker reinforced with salvaged metal and soundproofed with egg cartons, beside which sat a corkboard filled with maps, notes, photos, and something far worse: newspaper clippings about the Brinks murder, ranger schedules, satellite images of Devil's Den, and red string connecting targets, trails, and even code words written in military shorthand. One photo stood out: Kristen Brink with her daughters, clearly taken without her knowledge, printed and marked with the word test. suggesting that the attack wasn't just spontaneous, but premeditated and possibly part of a larger plan. That investigators still couldn't fully decipher. Another discovery deepened the mystery. A journal meticulously kept, where Crowder had written about silencing the forest, removing human noise, and restoring natural order, referring to campers and tourists as invaders and unworthy of the silence. Entries dated weeks before the Brinks attack detailed watching them eat, learning the father's weak side and how they don't see what's behind them, confirming that he had been stalking the family for days, if not longer, possibly selecting them based on some internal logic or delusion. Psychological profilers reviewing the journal called his mindset ritualistic predation, not driven by anger or impulse, but by ideology of belief that he was restoring balance by eliminating what he saw as intruders. And as the scope of the case expanded, a nationwide alert was issued with Crowder's image shared across every major network: rest stops, campgrounds, and ranger stations, urging the public to report any sightings of a man in a dark hoodie, black pants, sunglasses, and a red keychain flashlight. Still, there were no confirmed sightings, and every false lead drained resources and morale. Then came the breakthrough late one night. A hiker in the Ozarks uploaded a GoPro video showing a distant figure walking parallel to him on the opposite ridge. Too far for detail, but matching the exact gait and build of Crowder. And when authorities triangulated the location and combed the area, they found fresh fire remains, cigarette butts with Crowder's DNA, and a carving in a tree. "I see who walks loud." The message, both mocking and territorial, forced authorities to rethink their perimeter. Crowder wasn't running anymore. He was circling, possibly baiting them into chasing him in loops. And one agent proposed a chilling theory. Crowder had memorized the park's entire topography and was living in it like a ghost, using old mining shafts, forgotten bootlegger trails, and animal burrows to stay hidden, surfacing only when he needed supplies or wanted to remind them that he was still in control. The public panic reached a boiling point, and Devil's Den was temporarily closed. All visitors evacuated as tactical teams prepared for a new kind of confrontation, one that would involve psychological warfare more than bullets. A specialist in military defector retrieval joined the task force and suggested flooding the forest with noise radios, sirens and flashbangs, not to scare him, but to strip away the silence he craved, a strategy designed to disorient someone trained to thrive in silence. And the operation, dubbed Echo Collapse, began at dawn. Hundreds of coordinated bursts across key points in the forest, flushing deer from their beds and stirring birds into the air. But Crowder did not emerge instead. He responded in the most horrifying way possible. At the entrance to the park, pinned beneath a stone slab, they found another body this time. A retired ranger who had recently given interviews about his time working with Crowder years ago. Beside the body, written in charcoal on the road, were the words, "You walk too loud." The message was clear. Crowder wasn't hiding from the search, he was mocking it, and anyone connected to the investigation had now become a target. Agents were issued body armor, media contacts were cut off, and the manhunt was declared code red. A federal-level emergency only used when an active fugitive poses a credible national threat. By now, thousands of citizens were gripped by fear, and survivalist forums online began to hail Crowder as an anti-hero, a ghost soldier reclaiming the wild from civilization, forcing law enforcement to monitor online chatter for copycats and cult sympathizers. Meanwhile, the Brinks daughters, still recovering in therapy, revealed a final, disturbing detail. During the attack, the man had briefly spoken, not a threat, not a demand, but a whisper to the youngest girl, barely audible. "Tell the trees I'm listening." A phrase so eerie and cryptic that analysts began cross-referencing it with Crowder's journal and found it repeated multiple times, often paired with entries about tree lines as witnesses and leaves don't lie, suggesting that, in his mind, the forest was alive, sacred, and complicit. Part 4 of the story ends with the world closing in around a man who believed he was born to outlast it, and law enforcement was running out of time to stop him before the next bloodshed, in the silence he held so dear. In the early hours of the 6th week, as fog clung to the forest like breath on glass, and the search teams rotated in silence. A sudden and unexplainable signal change in one of the motion-triggered trail cams sent a ping to the command center. What they saw was brief, a mere flicker of movement at the edge of the image, but it was unmistakably a figure in a dark hoodie. Black pants, sunglasses, and a red keychain light catching the moonlight as he slipped past the infrared beam, and though it lasted less than 2 seconds, the location was precise, near the eastern boundary, where Devil's Den faded into private timberland. SWAT was mobilized instantly, air support was scrambled, and a containment net was set along the northern ridge. This was their moment, a chance to end what had become a nightmare woven into the roots of the Arkansas wilderness. As they advanced into the designated zone, a sharp crack echoed from the trees, not a gunshot, but a sonic anomaly, as if something had been triggered deep underground. Within minutes, they discovered a trapdoor camouflaged under pine needles and stone, leading to a tunnel carved decades ago by bootleggers, now repurposed into Crowder's escape route, a move so precise it confirmed their worst fears. He had always planned an exit, but just as hope dimmed, a secondary camera mounted by rangers near a trailhead picked up another motion, the same figure, walking upright, slowly, not running, as though inviting pursuit. The team split, one group securing the tunnel, the other giving chase through narrowing switchbacks that led to the old Firewatch Tower, long abandoned, now lit from within by a faint red glow. Surrounding it cautiously, the team breached the base and ascended in silence, floor by floor, until reaching the top hand, found it empty. Save for a single item placed in the center of the room, a ranger's badge wrapped in duct tape, a photo of the Brinks family with the word noise scrawled across it, and a tape recorder playing forest sounds whined, birds' leaves crunching underfoot, looping endlessly. It was a message, a riddle, a parting note from someone who thrived on outwitting his hunters. And just when they believed he had once again vanished, a team positioned along the western ravine spotted fresh boot prints in the mud leading not away but deeper into the ravine, toward a narrow fissure known as Devil's Spine, a place considered too dangerous for most hikers. With precision and caution, they moved in, navigating slick rocks and thorn-covered paths until one agent signaled a figure crouched near the creek bed, unmoving. Rifles raised, commands shouted, but the man didn't run. He slowly turned, his head revealing the unmistakable profile of Nathaniel Crowder. And yet something was off. He wasn't armed, wasn't hiding, but sitting as if meditating, his red keychain light dangling from his fingers. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, clear, and horrifying. "I wanted you to find me here, where it ends quiet." He stood, hands raised, and allowed himself to be cuffed without resistance. The final arrest captured on a thermal drone hovering high above the tree canopy. Back at command, disbelief turned to cautious celebration. The Phantom had been caught, alive, and still wearing the same clothes he'd haunted the woods in for over a month. But the nightmare was far from over, as agents cataloged evidence from his person and his various hideouts. They uncovered a USB drive concealed in his boot, encrypted with military-grade security. After hours of decryption, what emerged sent new chills through the task force. A video log of his hunts, compiled over years, filmed from miniature cameras embedded in trees, trail signs, even other campers' equipment, showing his movements, his stalking, and his cold, surgical preparations. Most disturbingly, there were folders labeled by name, dozens of them victims previously thought to have died in unrelated wilderness accidents. Their cases now reopened with Crowder at the center. His confession was emotionless, clinical. Detailed, he admitted to 14 killings across 5 national parks, though profilers believed the true number could be higher. In interviews, he spoke not of anger or hatred, but of preservation, claiming that too much noise kills the wild and that he was restoring the balance. His trial became one of the most watched in U.S. history, broadcast globally, with survivalists protesting in his favor, while victims' families filled the courtroom with silent grief. Forensic analysts revealed the chilling extent of his surveillance. including a plan to target another family just days before his arrest, proving he hadn't been finished. Inley paused. Ultimately, Crowder was sentenced to 17 life terms without parole and remanded to a high-security psychiatric federal prison in Colorado, where he remains under 24/7 observation in a soundproofed isolation unit. But the echoes of his crimes linger. Devil's Den remained closed for over a year, the Brink's daughters now living under assumed identities for safety. And rangers across the country underwent new training in psychological profiling and wilderness counter-tracking. The public debate over Crowder's actions continues online, where conspiracy forums label him the Whisperer, while others simply call him what he was, a serial predator who weaponized silence. And as for the forest, it grew quiet again, but not peacefully, because now every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves, every red flash in the dark reminds us of how close he came to vanishing forever into the trees, taking his secrets with him, and why the silence of Devil's Den will never sound the same again.